Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres, chers délégués, nous avons déjà pris du retard. S'il vous plaît, regagnez vos sièges. Je demande à Madame la responsable du protocole de bien vouloir présenter le programme de nos travaux.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, distingués invités, nous allons donc commencer cette réunion par la cérémonie d'ouverture qui sera ponctuée de 4 discours, notamment la représentante du gouvernement du Rwanda, le secrétaire général de la CEA, le docteur Nkosazana de la ministre Zuma, du Conseil exécutif. Je voudrais donc inviter son Excellence Louise Mushikiwabo, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération du Rwanda, représentante du gouvernement rwandais, pour son discours de bienvenue.
Your Excellency, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, dear sister and chairperson of the African Union Commission, by each other, brothers and sisters, it's a nice thing. Your Excellency and dear brother, Musa Faki Mahamat, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Chad, Your Excellency, Dr. Carlos Lopez, my dear friend and Executive Secretary of ECA, Your Excellency Erastus Mwencha, Deputy Chairperson, brothers and sisters, commissioners, excellencies, distinguished gathering. Ngaramutseho, good morning. Let me begin by welcoming all of you to Rwanda and to Kigali. I hope you are enjoying your stay, even though I know some of you arrived very late last night. It is a great honor for Rwanda to be hosting this very important summit, to be hosting all of you. Beg your forgiveness for any hitches during your time here that could have been inconveniencing or resulted in not feeling as comfortable as we would like you to do. For an event of this magnitude, and certainly a first time for Rwanda, let me assure you that so you 3 days of work. I had the opportunity to witness that in the meeting of the Bureau this morning, just before this session. And I sincerely thank our permanent representatives from Addis Ababa who have been in Kigali for the last 3 days, working exceptionally well and very mindful of time, an important commodity for us to prepare this Executive Council and to give shape to the important matters we will be dealing with in the next several days. I am also told that the PRC meetings have been very efficient in the conduct of the business. The meetings started and ended on time. The discussions were fruitful. And so congratulations to our Addis Ababa envoys for a job well done, and I'd like to request a round of applause for our PRs. Mine are just welcoming remarks, but I feel very tempted to go beyond the welcoming, and with the permission of the chair of the Executive Council, to say that this summit, in our view, should signal the beginning of a quest for efficiency on behalf of our continent. And when we talk about quest, we talk about process. And we're very aware of the weight of the past, the difficulty of merging our views and our ways. But I have no doubt that keeping our people, the people of this continent, on our mind and in our hearts, bringing about many of the positive changes we've already talked about so many times in the past. We have said, and we continue to say, that for Africa, this is a time of result. This is a time of implementation. This is a time of focus, but especially a time for genuine, serious service to the people of our continent. So it's on that tone that I think this Executive Council here in Kigali begins the important work that we have to do as a council, but also preparing for the meeting of our leaders, some of whom are expected in Kigali already tomorrow. So I just thought this was an important reminder that we begin stirring our minds and our ways to efficiency. This summit in Kigali for us is special in many ways, the most important of which is to have all of you, the 53 countries of this continent here gathered in Rwanda. We are truly, truly honored. This summit also signals very, very friendly distance from our partners and observers so that we can focus on what truly is priority for our union and for our countries. There is no question that we as a continent appreciate our partners and the work we do with them and the support they provide to us. But I'm sure they also understand that our common endeavor would work better if we do our part right, which is to truly take time for ourselves and our continent, and obviously keep them posted. Your Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters, the task before us in the next few days that we will spend here in Kigali needs all of us to work together, to consult, to engage, to talk, both in the formal meetings, but also during our breaks, to make sure that by the time our leaders meet on the 16th, They have a clear, concise agenda. They have our council, and they have the right atmosphere to conduct the important business of this summit. So working together more closely than before for the common good of our continent, I am sure that we will end with a very, very successful summit. Let me end there on substance, since my standing here was really to tell you how pleased we are to have you here to contribute to the tone of this Executive Council and to wish all of us a very successful. Also convey all of you, invite all of you to a time of fun and relaxation, a time of communion, a time of leisure and entertainment, and just enjoyment of each other's company tonight at 7 p.m. at Hotel Marriott, downtown Kigali. Though there is really no downtown in Kigali, it's all uptown. It feels funny to say downtown in Kigali. On one of the hills where Hotel Marriott is located in Kigali, and I wish to conclude by thanking all of you for your presence, for your kindness, for your compliments to us as a host country, and to tell you that for those of you who don't speak our language, that the people of this country are really, really excited to have their brothers and sisters from the continent here. We would like you to stay longer than the summit. In fact, we have made arrangements for those of you, deliberations, and a very pleasant stay in Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now I have the honor to invite Dr. Carlos Lopez, the UN Under-Secretary and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, for his speech.
Merci. Monsieur le Président du Conseil exécutif, ministre Moussa Faki Mahamat, plaisir de vous voir présider cette séance. Madame Louise Mushiki Wabo, ma sœur et hôte de notre réunion. Madame Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, ma sœur. Honorable ministre, vice-président de la Commission et commissaire. l'aimable hospitalité de notre hôte. La ville de Kigali, magnifiquement entretenue, mérite largement d'être à l'affiche de la nouvelle Afrique. Pour l'avenir, nous allons avancer avec enthousiasme pour définir le cap stratégique de l'Afrique suite à l'approbation de tant de programmes internationaux et africains l'année dernière, comme en témoignent les ambitions de l'agenda 2063 et son premier plan décennal. Les conditions sont réunies pour ce faire. La dernière conférence conjointe Union africaine-CEA des ministres des Finances, de la planification et du développement économique, tenue en mars-avril dernier, a été extrêmement riche en échanges. Les participants ont évalué les progrès macroéconomiques que nous avons surmontés sur la voie de la transformation et de l'industrialisation et les défis permanents qui nous tourmentent, comme les flux illicites de capitaux, la corruption, l'insuffisante valeur ajoutée ou les progrès limités réalisés au titre des objectifs du millénaire pour le développement, selon son évaluation finale. Les ministres ont approuvé un certain nombre de propositions importantes, l'une d'entre elles ayant trait à la nécessité d'adopter une approche bien réfléchie et justifiée pour l'Afrique sur la question des migrations. Permettez-moi donc de centrer mon intervention sur ce sujet. Ladies and gentlemen, so far this year, the Italian Coast Guard has rescued more than 30,000 people from the Mediterranean Sea, acting with courage, compassion, and efficiency. They deserve recognition from Africa because many of those souls are from the continent. Last year, more than 1 million people crossed the Mediterranean to reach Europe, many through Italy. This is a much larger number than in previous number. About 68% were from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan. Of the top 10 nationalities represented, only 1 in 10 was African. The European agency dealing with the issue, Frontex, acknowledges that the number of irregular migrants from Africa pales in comparison with regular arrivals. The humanitarian dimension associated with these latest developments has unfortunate similarities with both people phenomena in the direction of South America, Australia, South China, Andaman, Asian, and Red Seas. Throughout history, ships were not only used for exploring new territories or to trade. Migration as a very old user of ships. Stocks of migrants are normally accounted for in terms of nationalities and ID papers. But the phenomena precedes the modern territorial boundaries. Indeed, many migration movements helped shape to understand the complexity of people's mobility. According to official statistics, 250 million people currently live outside their countries of origin. However, between 1846 and 1940 alone, about 50 million Europeans moved to the Americas. More Europeans have moved to other parts of the world since then. It is therefore interesting to place in perspective just how many Africans are associated with the current perception of a tidal wave of migrants. According to data from the United Nations, those 250 million is exactly 8.5%. In Europe, that stock is slightly above 9 million people. For a population of around 1 billion, that means the equivalent of 90% of the continent's population. In fact, most Africans who migrate do so to other African countries. The continent has the highest intra-continent migration in the entire world. Human mobility, despite the many limitations that impede regional integration in our continent, is progressing well in Africa. In the parents, this is a universal trend. In the United Kingdom's recent Brexit vote, like in many other industrialized countries where populists push for anti-migrant positions, young people voted massively for diversity and integration. Unfortunately, in those countries, older people have been convinced that their lifestyles are under threat by migrants. Any specialist or well-informed citizen knows the opposite is true. Ladies and gentlemen, let me focus first on why people leave Africa before turning into an assessment of the benefits of migration. Every successful experience of industrialization has provoked movements of population, mostly in the direction of new production centers, but not always. Many factors influence human behavior, and the sociological context can determine parts of the population looking for exchange and interaction beyond their borders. China has produced close to 10 million migrants in the recent economic boom period. According to this week's edition of The Economist, so you can go and buy it, and I quote, "The extraordinary outflow of people from China is one of the most striking trends of recent decades," end of quote. They have left for a variety of reasons, like others did before them, like Africans will certainly continue to do, despite high growth. Indians moving to the United Arab Emirates are no different. Mexicans going to the United States of America, Indonesians to Australia, are also despite high growth. Why would Africa be any different? Not all seek migration due to ambition alone. Many are compelled to leave because they are in a situation of desperation. Conflicts provoking heavy casualties have risen significantly in the last 6 years in the continent. They are mostly associated with terrorism. Attacks by radical religious movements have increased 300% since 2009. Exclusion of social groups has become the most pervasive governance problem Africa has to confront. Pastoralist societies are particularly hard hit as they struggle to adapt to fast urbanization and growth of services in the economy. UNHCR has around 14 million Africans listed as, quote-unquote, people of concern, have also proven elusive for some, as they got expelled by other fellow Africans. Since independence, African countries have expelled other Africans 35 times. This lack of acceptance makes the journey elsewhere across the waters hazardous but potentially more attractive. There are also educated Africans who take planes rather than pickups in the desert and small rafts in the sea. 1 in every 6 university graduates finds a way out of their country of origin, making Africa's migrants surprisingly educated. The highly skilled account for only 3% of Africa's labor force, but 35% of the new migrants leaving the continent. That partly explains why remittances continue to rise, last year attaining $71 billion, or over 4% of the continent's combined GDP. In general, Africans do not look at migration negatively. In the collective psyche, the 12 million slaves forcibly moved to the Americas, as well as the less known but also significant movements of slaves to Arabia and India, have not been forgotten. In comparison, they expect current flows to be handled with the solidarity promised in the Human Rights Proclamation. That the current number of African migrants is relatively small. How to explain the growing concern almost... Ladies and gentlemen, world demographics are changing so fast that it is not possible to maintain the wealth distribution patterns we have become familiar with. It is difficult to demonstrate to the polity that austerity is not going to solve the twin problems of large debts and population aging. The majority of countries with high debt have also a structural challenge of population aging. In about 2 months, on 21st of September, Japan will hold its Respect for the Aged. They will join a further 31,000 centenarians feted before them. The acceleration of the age curve is so dramatic in Japan that by 2025, healthcare spending will rise 70%, home nursing by 160%, and pensions by 40%. Currently, 1 in every 4 Japanese is over 65. The labor force, despite the increase in the age of retirement, will diminish in the last 40 years to the levels that Japan had. The national debt of Japan is already 240% of GDP, contributors to the social security and consumption. In Europe, the average debt to GDP ratio is way above 100%. This amount of debt confronts a population that will have an excess of debts in relation to births of 63 million between now and 2050. That means that even with the net projection of migrants going to Europe maintained as it is right now, at 31 million people migrating, the population will shrink by 32 million. As in Japan, a quarter of the population is already it's over 65. Who believes austerity on its own will diminish their current crisis? In the Republic of Korea, the most robotized society in the world, the demonstration that robots will not resolve this aging has sunk in. The mentality of one blood, as they call it, is giving way to the embrace of migration. After all, robots do not contribute to social security. Jasmine Lee, born in the Philippines, is the first non-ethnic Korean member of parliament elected to the Korean National Assembly, breaking barriers that lasted for a very long time. China will also have to deal with the challenge of aging population. China's wealth per capita is now equivalent to that of Japan in the 1970s, yet its labor force is already diminishing. Ladies and gentlemen, in contrast to many of their parts, have to look into the future with the characteristics that future is likely to have, not the ones they are familiar with today. The demographic boom in Africa should be seen as part of its potential. African leaders should, nevertheless, be warned that the fate of Africans will depend on investments on human capital. There is no promised land anywhere without work and strategy. To say international migration is to say cross-border connections, the ties linking sending and receiving countries of the migration experience, appearing during present as well as past eras of migration. Once called the uprooted, migrants are now often called transnationals. This sensitivity is a result of studies underscoring the ways in which international migration cuts across national borders to produce a range of dynamic cross-border connections. No walls being erected in many parts of the world will deter such a trend. Improvements in literacy rates, transports, ICT, and public infrastructure in the last century have significantly influenced migration and transnational social connectivity and vice versa. Remittances sent by migrants to developing countries are large, like in Africa. Second large source of development finance after foreign direct investment. Rising, increase of almost 100% since 1999 to 2004. Stable, with less volatility than capital market flows or development assistance, and do not require interest or capital payments. However, remittances alone cannot remove the structural constraints of economic growth. A more hopeful view sees migrants serving as bridges or connectors, providing access to markets, sources of investment and expertise, while also helping to shape public debate, articulate reform plans, and help implement reforms and new projects. The model of the migrants that would lose the links with their original identity is being of individuals. Migrants are acquiring cosmopolitan competencies. They live in the era of Skype, Viber, and WhatsApp. Ladies and gentlemen, the overwhelming majority of the global population. There is no doubt that in today's unequal world, having one particular citizenship offers privileges and opportunities for some that are denied to others. Gaining privilege with such a strange, arbitrary criteria runs against the practice in almost any other form of organized social life. There are so many examples of legislation being implemented across the world to ensure what we call equal opportunity. So are birthrights a sort of entitlement like inheritance, or rather a lottery? From what I have just shared, you can see that migration seems to be boxed in a category that does not respond to logic, rights, or we can say even decency. There is a need to get out of this conundrum. Should African institutions lead the way? Can Africa lead the way? I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. May I now invite Her Excellency Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, for her speech.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. My sister, Louise, our gracious host. I can't say your surname because you don't call your sister with surnames. You call them with first names. So I'm not being disrespectful. Our brother, Musa, the Foreign Minister of Republic of Chad and Chairperson of the Executive, honorable ministers, members of the Executive, and heads of delegations, my brother, Carlos, Executive Secretary of UNHCR, Excellency Ernesto the Deputy Chairperson of the AU Commission and other commissioners, our brother here next to me, Ibrahim Mayaki, CEO of NEPAD, representatives from AU organs, executive secretaries of REX and AU representative and liaison offices, Excellencies, members of the PRC, high-level officials from the capitals, Commission and other organ staff, representatives of civil society, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Carlos, thank you very much for your sobering. And next year, the theme, as you know, is the demographic dividend. And I think that will have to be discussed with that in mind. A warm welcome to the 29th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union, and a special welcome to all the new members of the Executive Council who join us for the first time. We thank our hosts, the President, the government and people of Rwanda for the warm reception and excellent organization in this beautiful city of Kigali. The city is testimony not only to the resilience of the human spirit, but an example of how African cities can become nodes of transformation as centers of commerce, education, and culture, as productive hubs for industry, as vibrant markets for consumers, and as inclusive, safe, green, and peaceful spaces for all its inhabitants. Your Excellencies, it is with grave concern that we start this executive, as over the past few days we see the resurgence of conflict in South Sudan after more than 2 years of talks. Hardly 2 months after the formation of the Government of National Unity, the belligerents seem to be back in their trenches, and the people of South Sudan, instead of celebrating 5 years of independence, once again are barricaded in their homes or must flee like sheep before the wolves. As a continent, we must respect the lives of our people, the cause of the people's suffering. What is happening again in South Sudan is totally unacceptable. The continent cannot stand by and witness the suffering inflicted on the children, women, men, and young people of South Sudan, inflicted on fellow Africans. We continue to count the cost of conflict management and peace operations as a large single budget item of the African Union. Resources that should be spent on promoting the African skills revolution, on supporting young entrepreneurs, on building roads, houses, and provide capital, land, and technology to women and small farmers. Most importantly, we count the cost in civilian and peacekeepers' lives lost, in homes destroyed, when they were rebuilt not too long ago, in our girls abducted, in leadership and opposition that have resources to purchase tanks, helicopters, gunship, mortars, rock-propelled grenades, which are used against the people when there are no resources to buy food, as our people go hungry, and medicines as children die of malaria. I hope this summit will say enough is enough. Excellencies, we made a solemn declaration and a solemn pledge, the 50th anniversary, that we shall not bequeath wars and violent conflict to future generations of Africans, and to silence the guns by 2020. We must all do more to honor this pledge. Our 2016 theme on human rights must be a spur to action, to intervene in conflict situations before they spiral into violence, and to ensure that we strengthen democracy, human rights, promote unity in diversity, and inclusive governance in all our countries. Our human rights institutions that we created have the obligation to report and to identify. It's a journey that we have not reached our destination. So they have that responsibility to identify where each and every one of us has challenges. And as countries, we must work with our institutions to ensure that we improve on the specific areas identified. Silencing the guns requires a different approach to peace and security. Since the majority of our countries are stable and peaceful, we must continue to resolutely focus on Agenda 2060 priorities, such as building energy, road, rail, ICT infrastructure to power and connect homes and industries, expanding agriculture of our people, especially African children and young men and women, and building inclusive, democratic, and tolerant societies. We must put the African people first. Your Excellencies, during the 4 years of the term of this Commission, the Executive Council has played an important role in driving the mission of our Union. It has done this through regular reflections on challenges facing the continent. It had robust discussion on what must be done by the African Union, regions, and countries to move our transformation agenda forward. Indeed, the Executive Council sought to live up to its entreaty of Julius Malemu Nyerere, who said, I quote, "Unity can make it difficult for Africa and the African people to be disregarded and humiliated, and it will increase the effectiveness of the decisions we make and try to implement for our development. My generation led Africa to political freedom," he said. Those of Africa must pick up the flickering torch of African freedom, refuel it with their enthusiasm and determination, and carry it forward, close quote. The executive at its BADA ministerial retreat in 2014 noted that the dream of an Africa that is integrated, peaceful, and prosperous is achievable, provided that we construct this future based on actions taken now. Many of these actions occupy our minds during this period, such as the need for African commodity strategies to consolidate and rapidly expand the small gains in beneficiation, including critical, as we want to eliminate hunger. Without a relentless focus on value addition and manufacturing, Africa will fail to create the jobs needed to market each year and to reap the demographic dividend of a young and growing population. We must therefore continue to strengthen our capacities to take action needed today, as urged by the BADA Committee. Many of these capacities for the implementation of Agenda 2063 are within our power and of our choosing. It includes the choice to be Pan-African in our outlook as we collectively reflect on the African paradox of a continent that is rich in natural resources and yet its people are poor. The resolution of this paradox is indeed the mission of current generations of leaders and peoples of Africa. Some of the actions to resolve the paradox will have regional dimensions as we strengthen integration, build common regional markets, develop infrastructure that connects us, and harmonize policies so that we strengthen free movement of the people, goods, and services. We also have responsibilities at national levels. Foreign ministers and members of the executive are in the strategic position with a view of the Pan-African perspective as well as national priorities. They have a bird's eye view of how movement on national development contributes to the continental agenda, and to therefore promote cooperation amongst their neighbors and countries and to drive the continental agenda. This role of the Executive Council as a catalyst and an enabler of the Pan-African agenda has found expression in a range of issues over the last 4 years. In reflections during the 50th anniversary, the development of Agenda 2063, the response of the AU to the Ebola crisis, the integration agenda, the issues such as wildlife conservation, tourism, the monitoring of Agenda 2063 10-year implementation plan and flagship projects. It is as a direct result of this Pan-African catalyst role of the Executive Council that we are able to move a step forward at this summit to present the African passport, and we hope to also move forward on the continental free trade. Excellencies, the response from Africans on the idea of an overwhelming invest, visit the tourist and heritage sites in their own continent and experience its rich and beautiful diversity. The Executive Council has thus been seized with this continental agenda for social and economic transformation, deeply aware of the resolution of the African paradox, requires unity and deliberate action, and that united we are stronger. As Kwame Nkrumah said, I quote, "If we are to remain free, if we are to enjoy full benefit of Africa's resources, we must be united to plan for our total defense and the full exploitation of our material and human means in the full interest of our people. To go it alone will limit our horizons, curtail our expectations, and threaten our liberty," close quote. Your Excellency, this august body during the past 4 years has also worked with the Commission and the PRC to improve working methods of the African Union and commissioned a comparative study of the regional organizations to this effect. This resulted in that our summits focus on strategic issues critical to the well-being of the African people and the continent. The process also saw the operationalization of the AU specialized technical committees of ministers with powers to take decisions on matters pertaining to their respective mandates. This means that ministers across the different sectors, from justice to health, environment, mining, tourism, social development, gender, financing, and so on, have become more active and can do more to move forward the Pan-African agenda in their areas of competence. The approach to working methods of the Union also informed the reforms of the Commission, which we have taken over the 4 years, including review of the staff rules and regulations, our performance management systems, revitalizing administrative structures, strengthening our internal and external audit processes, finalizing key policies on travel, procurement, and ethics to ensure that we use resources effectively and prudently. We also implemented measures to improve the regional and gender spread of staff in the Commission and organs. There still needs more to be done. It includes the work still in progress to become fit for purpose for the implementation of Agenda 2063. Moreover, the decision on streamlining the work of the summit also called for review of the Constitutive Act and its statutes so that the Union and its organs are also fit for purpose for the continental integration agenda. And this work needs to be continued. The adoption of Agenda 2063 also meant a much more strategic approach towards Africa's global partners and partnerships, laying the foundation for our common African positions on the SDGs and on climate change. More importantly, though we consolidated continental partnerships with the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the African Development Bank, Africa Capacity Building Foundation with regional economic communities, as well as with youth, women and civil society organizations and other continental institutions based on the common agenda of transformation. Excellencies, let me come to another issue that is going to be the subject of discussion of this summit. The words of Gamal Abdel Nasser, one of the founders of the OAU, rings true today when he said, I quote, "He who cannot support himself cannot take his own decisions," close quote. Pertinent words indeed. Self-reliance is a cornerstone of Pan-Africanism, and 53 years later, these words remain a challenge for current generations. Over the last 4 years, we've made some progress, and this summit must consolidate efforts so that we finalize our decision on sustainable financing and the Peace Fund. Excellencies, as we discuss human rights with a particular emphasis on the rights of women, it is appropriate that we're doing so in Rwanda. Rwanda is a leader in the world and in Africa on the issues of empowerment of women and girls. It does this through the critical mass of women in its parliament. Indeed, 64% of legislatures in this country are women. 39% in the government, and also in the judiciary and local councils. It also has deliberate programs to ensure equal access to productive assets, such as land, property, and capital, and access to education and health. The impact of these policies are visible in the progress the country has made over the last 2 decades, rising out of the ashes of the 1994 genocide, especially on key human development indicators such as reducing household poverty, access to health care and insurance, as well as to education. A few days ago, the African Women's Movement presented President Paul Kagame and myself with awards of Gender Champion. On that occasion, I made the remark that we should stop the saying that behind every successful man, there is a woman. This is not right. What we want today and what we should be saying today is for men and women to work side by side. Side by side for the eradication of poverty, hunger, and disease. Side by side to resolve conflicts and building peaceful societies. Side by side to make our continent great. Excellencies, let me take this opportunity to thank the executive for the guidance, the cooperation, and being always responsive whenever called upon by the Commission during the past 4 years. The retreats ensured common purpose, robust engagements, and a focus on the strategic challenges of the continent. Moreover, the establishment of the BIDA Ministerial Follow-up Committee on Agenda 2063 means stewardship and monitoring by the Executive Council of our continental agenda. We are confident that you will lend the same support, in fact, even more, to the incoming Commission. They have the task to build on the foundations we have laid in the adoption of Agenda 2063 and as implementation moves to the next level. As the Commission's term draws to the end, and indeed this is the last Executive Council that this Commission will participate in, we thank you again for your support as we bow out gracefully. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. L'honneur me revient maintenant d'inviter Son Excellence Monsieur Moussa Maïssa Faki Mahamat, ministre des Affaires étrangères, de la coopération africaine et de l'intégration africaine de la République du Tchad, président en exercice du Conseil exécutif pour son discours d'ouverture.
Merci. Excellence, Madame, chère Louise, Excellence, Madame la Présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, chers collègues, Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif de la Commission économique des Nations unies pour l'Afrique, Monsieur le vice-président et Mesdames et Messieurs les commissaires, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, distingués invités, Mesdames, Messieurs. En votre nom à tous, j'adresse mes sincères remerciements au gouvernement et au peuple rwandais qui ont bien voulu abriter cette session de l'Union africaine et nous ont offert toutes les commodités nécessaires à la réussite de nos travaux, en commençant par ces magnifiques complexes. Toujours en votre nom, je voudrais exprimer ma profonde admiration au gouvernement et au courageux peuple rwandais qui, en l'espace de 20 ans, a su surmonter la terrible épreuve du génocide pour reconstruire un État dont la réussite sur tous les plans est aussi rapide que spectaculaire. Nous en sommes tous fiers, chère Louise. Je voudrais enfin saluer et féliciter le comité des représentants permanents qui a préparé cette 29e session ordinaire du Conseil exécutif, qui elle-même est le prélude de la 27e session ordinaire de la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement, consacrée, comme vous le savez, cette année aux droits de l'homme, avec un accent particulier sur les droits de la femme. C'est l'occasion pour moi de saluer ici tous les États qui ont pris des mesures concrètes qui vont dans le sens du respect et de la promotion de ces droits. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres et chers collègues, la présidence en exercice de notre Union, avec les chefs d'État concernés et la présidente de la Commission, s'est engagée dans un processus de rationalisation et d'efficacité des réunions de nos instances supérieures à travers l'allègement de leurs ordres du jour. C'est dans cet esprit qu'elle a jugé utile de proposer de limiter l'ordre du jour du 27e sommet à des questions stratégiques, au nombre desquelles le financement de l'Union et son budget, les élections, notamment celles des membres de la Commission, et les questions de paix et sécurité sur le continent. L'actualité, notamment au Soudan du Sud, nous interpelle et nous interpelle vivement. La mise en œuvre de cette décision pour les rencontres à venir de notre Union reposera désormais sur le COREB, la Commission et le Conseil exécutif, dont le rôle est important dans la préparation et le suivi des décisions qui seront prises. La 29e session du Conseil exécutif aura ainsi à examiner, entre autres, l'examen du projet du budget 2017 préparé par son sous-comité et qui est en adéquation avec les objectifs fixés. Je tiens à saluer le travail qui nous a été soumis. l'examen des rapports du Conseil exécutif et de ses comités, et notamment la conclusion de la retraite de Nairobi sur le financement de l'Union, la revue des progrès enregistrés dans la mise en œuvre du premier plan décennal de l'agenda 2063, une séance d'information de la Commission sur le procès Hissène Habré et la Cour pénale internationale. Le Conseil aura aussi à procéder à l'examen du rapport du panel ministériel sur les élections des membres de la Commission et l'élection des commissaires ainsi que l'élection des 4 juges de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Vous le savez, chers collègues, sur la base de ces éléments, il nous revient la tâche de soumettre au chef d'État un ordre du jour allégé et des recommandations claires et pertinentes. À cet égard, nous croyons que l'orientation nouvelle que nous voulons donner à nos rencontres devrait mettre l'accent sur les points suivants, et ils ne sont pas limitatifs. L'établissement d'un programme d'activité réaliste et réalisable en début de chaque année sur la base des priorités stratégiques précises. La présentation par la Commission et les autres organes d'un seul rapport annuel d'activité axé sur les actions entreprises et les résultats obtenus. L'instauration d'un système d'évaluation de la mise en œuvre des décisions prises pour situer les manquements et les insuffisances en vue de le corriger à temps. L'allègement de l'ordre du jour de la conférence, en le limitant aux questions considérées stratégiques sur lesquelles une décision est requise de la part des chefs d'État et de gouvernement. La rationalisation des débats thématiques au niveau des chefs d'État, soit en organisant ces débats au niveau des ministres compétents pour ne soumettre que les synthèses aux chefs d'État pour approbation, soit en instituant de ces résultats. L'organisation des réunions de haut niveau, de hauts comités et de comités ministériels bien avant la tenue des sommets pour éviter des réunions parallèles pendant nos sommets. Voilà, chers collègues, entre autres, quelques pistes de réflexion. Chers collègues, une nouvelle approche méthodologique est nécessaire. La rationalisation et la gestion du temps le sont tout autant. Il nous faut une sorte d'organisation, des divisions, seraient des divisions scientifiques du travail, diraient certains. Ce qui permettra naturellement à la prochaine commission d'être plus efficace et des sommets le soient aussi. Nous aurions ainsi, au lieu de trop embrasser au risque de mal étreindre, de prendre plutôt à bras le corps nos problèmes pour essayer de les résoudre. Tout en souhaitant la bienvenue parmi nous des nouveaux ministres des Affaires étrangères, je déclare ouverts les travaux de la 29e session ordinaire du Conseil exécutif de l'Union africaine. Je vous remercie.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, il y a eu lapsus. Le président du Conseil exécutif, c'est bien M. Moussa Faki Mahamat et non Maïssa. Toutes mes excuses, Monsieur le Président de séance. Alors, nous sommes arrivés à la fin de la cérémonie d'ouverture. On va passer à la session close. Vous l'avez constaté, on a pris quelques minutes de retard. La photo de groupe se fera au moment de la pause déjeuner.